Cain Latori, the imperial guard of slave origin, was breathing his last while protecting the mad emperor who had made a pact with a demon until the very end. In those final moments, Cain wondered how history would remember him. Would he be remembered as a knight who maintained his loyalty until death, or would he be labeled a foolish loser who failed to read the currents of his time? Neither of these options appealed to him. Hallo Listein, the leader of the rebel army, appeared before him, shouting angrily and exhaustedly, questioning why Cain had changed the path of his sword at the crucial moment. Cain believed it was better to simply disappear from everyone's memory. Cain, who had lived 29 years as an orphan, considered this fate his own choice and asked, "Hello," whom he addressed as the young master of the Duke's house, not to start a pointless fight. "Hello," continued to scream in anguish, asking him why he didn't run away, and instead made this decision, then embraced him as he was dying, pleading with him to open his eyes and rise. After his death, Cain found himself walking in a surreal space resembling a vast expanse of water under a star-studded sky, wondering if this was death. He felt that the freedom he had gained was not as wonderful as he had imagined, and as he was thinking about Hello and how he had cried for him, reassuring himself that his friend would be fine on his own, a violent flash of energy struck him. Suddenly his soul was transferred into the body of a newborn baby, and he heard a man's voice welcoming him to the world by the name of Karen. While Cain was in a state of shock and disbelief, an elderly man, who looked like an older version of Hello, held him and congratulated him on his courage for not crying, wishing for him to grow up healthy as his youngest grandson. This immense shock caused the infant Karen to burst into tears, as he realized deep down the astonishing truth that he had been reborn as Hello's grandson. 45 years after those events, 10-year-old Karen Listein, the only son of Count Bali, the third son of Hallo Listein, was receiving a history lesson. The teacher was explaining the modern historical society's view of the knight Cain Latori, who died with the evil emperor. The teacher explained that although Cain failed to prevent his master from treading the path of evil, he remains to this day a symbol of loyalty because he stayed by his master's side until the end. When the teacher asked Karen for his opinion, Karen first asked the teacher for his opinion. The teacher gave the prevailing view, believing that the Grand Duke, Hello, wanted to restore the honor of his close friend, citing the famous story of their friendship. But Karen surprised his teacher with a completely different opinion, stating that he believed his grandfather, Hello, hated his dead friend, and that he deliberately polished Cain's name and embellished his reputation for this very reason. The teacher was surprised by Cain's words and asked him what he meant. Karen explained his theory, saying that his grandfather could not forgive Cain for his decision to choose death instead of joining him on the path of revolution, thereby ignoring Cain's own wish to die quietly without being made a hero. The teacher was astonished but remembered unofficial records stating that the duel between Hello and Cain ended too quickly for their comparable skills. The teacher realized that if one assumed Cain deliberately chose death over fighting his friend, Karen's argument became very compelling, and he marveled at a 10-year-old's ability to reach such a profound conclusion. The teacher felt extremely flustered, thinking to himself that if he agreed with this impudent opinion, the Duke's knights might cut off his head for lèse majesté. As he stammered, admitting he had never considered this viewpoint, Karen suddenly burst out laughing. Karen then revealed he was just joking, wondering why his teacher was so surprised. Afterward, Karen returned his thoughts to his current situation, confirming to himself that his name was now Karen Listein, the youngest grandson of the Duke Listein's family. It took him some time to grasp the situation, but he eventually came to the realization that he had been reborn as Hallo Listein's grandson. He wondered angrily how that fool dared to turn him into a hero against his explicit wishes. He should have understood without it being said. Later, Karen found his father, Bali, Hallo's youngest son, praying. After his lesson ended, Karen approached him and asked his father if he was worried about the upcoming awakening ceremony. Bali apologized to his son, and when Karen asked why, the father expressed his concern that he might have passed on his limitations, as he had been unable to awaken his magical power, unlike his uncles. Karen warmly reassured his father, affirming that no matter what anyone said, he was the best father to him. Bali was deeply moved by his son's words, embraced him in tears, and told him he was also the best son to him. He then affectionately asked him what he wanted for dinner, to which Karen enthusiastically replied that he wanted meat, of course. In his room, as Karen lay thinking about the awakening ceremony, memories of his past life as Cain returned. He remembered a conversation with a young Hello, where the concept of an awakening ceremony was foreign to him. Hello explained it was an ancient ritual in their family to unleash latent magical power. Cain scoffed at the idea, expressing his disinterest in powers one is born with, with a silver spoon. Hello explained that not everyone could awaken their power, and even those who didn't automatically become the head of the family. Hello then tried to pique Kane's interest by talking about an amazing secret passed down only to the family head. Kane curiously asked if this secret was a great treasure or a magic book that grants wishes, to which Hello replied in the affirmative. Kane admitted a slight interest, explaining his real dream was to live quietly in a secluded place. After Hello laughed at his dream, Kane pretended to be angry at his friend's joke, so Hello seriously promised that when he became the family head one day, he would make a special exception and tell him the secret. Karen's thoughts returned to the present as he sat in his room, thinking about the magic power awakening ceremony. He decided to himself that his father had no reason to worry. Blue energy and lightning began to surround his body as he revealed the truth that he had already awakened his magical power long ago. In a later scene, Karen was with his parents, looking in awe and admiration at a technologically advanced train, expressing his amazement as it was the first time he had seen one. His mother proudly told him that many of the technologies used in making this train were commercialized thanks to his father, Bali's personal patronage. The father tried to be humble and downplay his achievement, but his mother insisted it was amazing. Karen agreed with her, declaring with all sincerity that he was very proud of his father. Karen continued his thoughts on the train, admiring his father who, despite not having awakened his magical power, was an amazing man who single-handedly managed 30% of the Liechtenstein Duchy's financial affairs. With an ever-affectionate mother and a father devoted to his family, Karen concluded that they were truly perfect parents. As the train continued its journey, Karen spotted a massive castle looming in the distance through the window. It was the main residence of the Liechtenstein family, Chonghae Castle. Karen felt a mixture of anticipation and anger as he thought about his grandfather, Hallo Liechtenstein, being in that place. His anger flared internally, wondering how Hallo dared to turn him into a great historical figure remembered in history against his will. At that moment, Karen released a small amount of magical energy, waking his father. And at that moment, Karen made a firm decision to become a constant nuisance to his grandfather, and to be the biggest delinquent in the history of the Liechtenstein family. Karen vowed to his grandfather in his mind, telling him to wait and see what his dear youngest grandson, who was on his way, would do. When the train arrived at the station, a welcoming party was there to greet them. Karen's father exchanged greetings with a man named Heinrich, who expressed his constant gratitude for the Duke's family's generosity. The Sea Wolf Knights at the station caught Karen's attention, as he noticed they were different from the knights in his region. He wondered if they had felt the mana he had already awakened, but he didn't care about the possibility of the news reaching his grandfather, considering it only a matter of time. The family was guided into the main castle, specifically to a spacious reception room, where Karen was asked to wait while Count Bali went to greet the family elders. Karen felt bored waiting in the vast room, and wished he had asked to go to the library instead. Suddenly, another boy in the room interrupted his thoughts, mocking him by saying the rumors were true, that Karen was indeed a bookworm, as the first thing he asked for upon arrival was the library. The boy then insulted Karen and his father, saying that since he was from his uncle Bali's lineage, his chances of awakening mana were slim, so it was better for him to study to make money like the common folk, just like his father. This insult angered Karen, who coolly asked the boy if he wanted to fight. The boy was surprised by his reaction but gathered a little mana, thinking he would give Karen the upper hand. But Karen calmly wondered if there was a troublemaker being raised in the main house, then unleashed an aura of his own mana, leaving the boy completely stunned. The boy asked in shock when and how Karen had awakened his mana, to which Karen replied with a smile that his father didn't know anything about it either. Karen then told his cousin, whom he addressed as brother, that they had a problem. Karen announced that there was no need for two troublemakers in the family, and that he would take that role for himself, so the other should make way for him, leaving his cousin frozen in place with fear. Karen unleashed a terrifying aura around him and suggested to his cousin Leo that they have a little fight. Elsewhere in the castle, the eldest uncle, Tiles Liechtenstein, sat with his two brothers. Heinrich was informed that Karen had already awakened his mana, which the third knight commander confirmed. The second uncle, Raphael Liechtenstein, commented that Karen had hidden his mana awakening from the main house, questioning the intentions of their brother Bali, whom he called a failure. Bali seemed genuinely surprised, confirming he didn't know either. Tiles scolded his brother Raphael for his haste, pointing out that it wasn't strange for the failure not to know since he himself couldn't awaken mana, then described the whole situation as pathetic. Suddenly, a servant burst into the room in a panic, asking the head butler to come quickly, then called out for the young master, Raphael. Hallo Liechtenstein muttered that a misunderstanding had occurred. Raphael realized it was about his son and stood up angrily. Meanwhile, in the reception room, Leo was lying on the ground, defeated. When Raphael arrived and saw the scene, he grabbed Karen in anger, calling him an ill-mannered pup, and asked him what he was thinking. At that moment, Bali, and Tiles arrived. Karen calmly replied that it was because Leo had insulted his father. Karen wondered in front of his uncle if he would have remained silent if he were in his place. Raphael claimed that Karen was spouting nonsense, grabbed Karen and turned to Bali, telling him to shut up and that all of this happened because of his failure to raise his son. The head butler intervened at that moment, asking everyone to stop, announcing that the master of the house, Hello, would judge the matter himself. Raphael was ordered to let go of Karen, which he did reluctantly. Bali rushed to his son to check on him, and Karen assured him he was fine. After that, the head butler asked them all to go see the master of the house. As they walked down the long corridor, Karen thought to himself that it had been a long time since he last saw Hello. Upon entering the study, Hello, sitting behind his desk, confronted them with a direct question to Karen, asking why he had caused such a big incident immediately upon arrival. Bali tried to defend his son, but Hello silenced him sternly, asserting that he hadn't asked him and that he would hear the answer directly from his son. Hello told Karen that he knew he wasn't reckless enough to cause trouble without thinking of the consequences, and asked him for a detailed explanation of his actions. Karen was internally surprised by Hello's willingness to listen to him before punishing him, describing it to himself as an inappropriate display of chivalry. Karen then repeated his answer clearly, saying that Leo had insulted his father. Raphael exploded in anger again, accusing Karen of lying and demanding he tell the truth. At that, Hello slammed his fist on the desk and yelled at Raphael to be silent, questioning how he dared to raise his voice in his presence. Raphael apologized to his father, Hello, who decided to summon Leo to confirm the facts and ordered Heinrich to bring him as soon as his treatment was finished. But before that, Hello turned his attention to Karen, pointing out that the matter of the insult wasn't all he wanted to ask about. Karen anticipated his grandfather's question and cheerfully announced that if he was asking about Mana, he had awakened it 3 years ago, shocking those present. Hello asked him why he had hidden it even from his father for all this time, wondering to himself about this boy who had awakened Mana on his own at such a young age. Karen explained that he didn't realize it was Mana until he read about it in a book later, and when his grandfather pressed him to know what happened next, Karen smiled innocently and said he just wanted to keep it a secret. He added that secrets are fun, and that it was more amusing because the knights in his region had no idea. Hello asked him if that was all, and Karen cheerfully confirmed it. At that moment, Leo arrived, his wounds bandaged, and Hello immediately asked him if he had indeed insulted his uncle. Karen began an elaborate theatrical performance, speaking with feigned sadness about Leo's insult to his father, describing him as a vulgar man who only cares about money. Karen then continued by describing his own father as incompetent and arrogant, wondering how much grief he would feel if his father died without seeing the light. He then concluded his speech by admitting that, despite all that, he shouldn't have hit Leo, and that he had committed a great sin. Leo was horrified by this twisted speech and vehemently denied saying it. At that, Karen released a burst of his energy to intimidate his cousin. Hello calmly asked Leo if what Karen said was true, and Leo fearfully admitted that it was. After hearing the confession, Hello decided that since the awakening ceremony was the next day, he would postpone both boys' punishment until after the ceremony, and ordered them to go rest. Later that night, Hello asked his servant Heinrich for his opinion on Bali's son. Heinrich replied diplomatically that he felt there were many aspects to the boy that might interest the master of the house. Hello agreed, describing Karen as an interesting boy, not only because he awakened Mana on his own and hid it for 3 years, but also because he subtly criticized the level of the knights in his father's territory, which Hello took as a hint that he himself had been neglecting his son, Bali. Although Heinrich thought his master was overthinking it, Hello insisted that this grandson was different. Hello said they would discover Karen's true nature, and whether he possessed something special at the next day's ceremony, expressing his intense curiosity about whether he would finish the ceremony safely, and what he would gain from it. Later that night, the entire family gathered in an outdoor location in preparation for the ceremony. Karen noticed the elders of the Liston family in their robes and felt their immense power despite their retirement. He also saw all the family members present, Tiles, and his daughter Leone, and Raphael, and his son, Leo. Karen realized this ceremony was more important than he had thought. In the center of the gathering was a stone platform, on which was placed a large black stone, which Karen immediately recognized as the Oath Stone. Hello announced the start of the eye-opening ritual, explaining that when Karen passes through the rift opened by the Oath Stone, he will enter a world the stone will show him. He explained that this world differs from person to person, and the ritual will end when Karen shatters that world using the weapon of clear insight he will acquire there. After Karen confirmed his readiness, Hello used a necklace to activate the Oath Stone, from which a pillar of blue energy shot out, opening a glowing rift in the air. As Bali held his son's shoulder anxiously, he asked him if he was scared, and if he would really be okay. Karen reassured his father that he would be fine and promised to return. Karen thought about the task required of him, to shatter the world with a weapon he acquires, and considered it an easy task, assuring himself that breaking things had always been his specialty. From a distance, Hello wished in his heart for his grandson to overcome his fear. As soon as Karen stepped through the rift, he found himself in a familiar and horrifying place, the Imperial Palace, burning and filled with the bodies of his dead comrades. He wondered angrily why the stone was showing him these painful memories, and whether the intention was to make him feel guilty for his comrades who died unjustly. Karen heard a mysterious voice describing his world as tragic and desolate, calling him the child of the Blue Wolf. The voice told him the time of the covenant had come and that he would fulfill what he had pledged with his ancestor. Karen asked the unknown voice if it was a demon, but the voice denied it, asserting that vile demons would not dare defile the blood that runs in his veins. The voice urged Karen to overcome his fear and ascend to the throne, where what he desired awaited. When Karen reached the throne, which the emperor had wanted to protect so desperately that he made a deal with a demon, and as he walked up the stairs leading to it, he felt as if he were walking over their corpses, remembering that he had never imagined this would be the cause of their deaths. He found his old weapon there. The voice welcomed him as a representative of the Blue Wolf clan, and told him this was his weapon. Karen immediately recognized his beloved sword given to him by the emperor, the demonic sword, Ruin. The voice asked him to imbue it with mana, but Karen objected, saying the sword devours its user's soul. The voice reassured him that the demonic will that once inhabited the sword had already been annihilated by his grandfather, and what he was seeing was merely a distorted form left by the demon's curse, and that he was the only one capable of awakening it. Karen hesitated, wondering if touching the sword was safe, afraid of returning to the person he once was, who obeyed the emperor's orders and took countless lives. At that moment, Hello's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to overcome his fear. Karen finally understood the true meaning of Hello's unusual kindness. The purpose of the eye-opening ritual was not just to obtain a weapon, but for the heir who awakens the mana of clear insight to overcome their greatest fear. Armed with this understanding, Karen reached his hand confidently towards his sword. As soon as Karen gripped the sword, an immense blue energy he recognized as the mana of clear insight flooded him, and the sword's shape began to change in his hand. The mysterious voice told him it didn't know why the sword appeared to him in its former guise, Ruin, but it explained that this sword originally belonged to his ancestor, Rael. The voice mentioned that the reason this sword was not recorded in history books, unlike the other sword Graham that Hello took, was that its power possessed a nature completely different from that of the family. Karen felt intense pain as the latent mana in the sword began to etch itself into his body, but the voice ordered him to endure. Karen noticed the flow of mana in his body becoming more ferocious, and he asked the voice for the sword's true name. The voice revealed that this sword was the execution sword Guillotine, the blade that had beheaded countless demons and devoured their powers, to the point that the demons themselves forgot its existence out of sheer fear. Karen contemplated his weapon's new name. The voice commented that a sword resembling the darkness of the deep sea perfectly suited Karen's destiny. Karen asked about the voice's identity, guessing it might be the Blue Dragon, the guardian dragon of their house, but the voice replied that Karen did not yet possess enough power to bear its true name, and invited him to visit it in the North Sea one day when he gains the strength to rule the seas. Afterward, Karen asked how to leave this world, and the voice pointed out that he already knew the answer. Karen realized what he had to do, shatter the world as he was told at the beginning of the ritual. With great enthusiasm, he declared that he had always wanted to try that, then swung the sword powerfully, shattering the illusory world around him. In the real world, Hello was consoling the anxious Bali, admitting that it is painful for a father to see his son walk a path he could not, but he stressed that these are the moments when one must prove their resolve. Suddenly the oath stone began to crack violently, and Leo shouted, alerting his grandfather that the stone was breaking. In a moment of general shock, the stone completely shattered. Karen appeared in a flash of light where the broken stone had been, holding his new sword. He looked around with a smile and asked what had happened to the oath stone, noting that it was broken. Bali confronted him angrily, demanding to know what he did. Karen replied cheerfully as he raised the sword high, announcing that it was the execution sword Guillotine of our ancestor Rael Listine. These words stunned Hello and the elders. This legendary blade had been erased from the family's history, its existence passed down only orally to the patriarch and the elders. They all wondered why it had appeared now, while Hello pondered whether the time of the covenant was approaching. Hello finally asked his grandson if he was afraid of this sword, to which Karen replied with complete confidence, no. After Hello processed the situation, he began to think about ancient history. A long time ago, their ancestors made a covenant with the Blue Dragons to annihilate the demons, and as a token of this covenant, they left behind the oath stone, awaiting the descendant who would one day fulfill the promise. Hello looked at his grandson Karen, wondering if he was the one destined to fulfill this promise. Accordingly, Hello raised his hand and officially declared that Karen, son of Bali Listane, as the one chosen by the execution sword, guillotine, was a legitimate member of Cheonghae Castle and a direct heir qualified to inherit the initiation rites. These words angered Raphael, who objected to granting these rights to such a brat. Meanwhile, Bali rushed to check on his son, but Karen assured him he was unharmed. Tiles, the eldest uncle, was deep in thought, admitting to himself that he had never heard of this legendary sword before, and that its aura alone was bone-chilling. In his mind, Tiles addressed his brother Bali, warning him that he would not let the matter of succession be affected by a new variable like his son, even though Karen was now walking a path no one had before. After that, Hello declared the eye-opening ceremony over and ordered everyone to return. As they were leaving, Raphael angrily confronted his older brother Tiles, asking if he was just going to stand by, to which Tiles calmly replied that they would sit and talk soon. Raphael thought that even someone as greedy as Tiles felt the danger. Raphael expressed his confusion and anger, wondering why Bali's son was chosen of all people. Tiles advised him that the most important thing now was not to fight among themselves. When it was time for his parents to leave, Bali asked his son with concern if he would be all right on his own. Heinrich reassured him that Cheonghae Castle was the safest place. Bali agreed that the castle was safe from external threats but expressed his worry about internal ones, though he added that his brothers wouldn't dare act recklessly in their father's presence. Heinrich approached them and informed them that Lady Sabina would oversee Karen's initiation rites. Both Karen and his father felt relieved. Sabina Listein, Hello's younger sister, was known for skills that were no less than her brother's, and she was nicknamed the White Wolf. Bali advised his son to be respectful with her, and Karen promised he would. Before leaving, Heinrich relayed a final message from Hello, stating that a permanent residence for Bali's family would be prepared in the castle and they could visit any time. Bali was deeply moved by this gesture from his father and thanked Heinrich, saying he could now leave in peace. He bid farewell to his son, asking him to take care of himself and to turn to him when needed. After the train departed, Heinrich led Karen through the castle, saying that Lady Sabina was waiting for him. Before they arrived, Heinrich gave Karen a piece of advice, asking him to avoid calling Lady Sabina by the title grandmother because she hated that title intensely. Karen thanked him for the advice, though he wondered to himself about the strangeness of it. They then arrived at the spirit training hall in Cheonghae Forest, a place only the direct bloodline was allowed to enter. Heinrich told Karen that Lady Sabina was waiting for him inside, and that Lord Leo was also there. At the special request of his father, Raphael, Karen was delighted to hear this and went inside, while Heinrich commented to himself that things were about to get noisy again. Karen felt a tremendous mana aura emanating from the hall even before he entered. When he opened the door, he announced his arrival, greeting the White Wolf, and a sharp voice from inside ordered him to enter without delay. Karen was surprised by Lady Sabina's youthful appearance. She welcomed him and asked if he was surprised that she didn't look as he had imagined. Sabina commented on how quickly time passed, as Bali's sweet son had already grown up. Karen immediately realized that her eternal youth was due to reconstructing her body with mana, an ability possessed only by those at the 8-star master level. Sabina ordered Karen to sit cross-legged next to Leo. Karen complied and whispered to his nervous cousin that they would be seeing a lot of each other from now on and that he was looking forward to it. Sabina commented on his knowledge of her title, so Karen told her he had read about it in history books because he liked them. Sabina smiled and said that just as her brother Hello described, he was indeed an interesting boy. When Karen asked her what his grandfather had said, she relayed his message, "He's a boy you'll like very much," and added that she now understood why after seeing him for herself. Sabina recalled her conversation with Hello, who described Karen as a child who must sail across a vast sea, and asked her to be his lighthouse to guide him so he could rule that ocean. Sabina saw in Karen an immense potential like the open sea, wild and infinite, and though he was still unpolished, he might one day rule an entire generation. She considered meeting this interesting boy an amusing affair. Sabina began the lesson, explaining that sitting cross-legged was the foundation of mana cultivation, and that once they passed the preliminary stage, they would be able to cultivate mana without needing to sit, just as she does. She then released a wave of clear sea mana that amazed the boys. Sabina explained the Sea Overlord method, which is based on creating an ocean of mana within the body and controlling it. She explained that a person's strength increases with the number of oceans they control. Controlling 8 oceans means reaching the rank of 8 stars. As for mastering those 8 oceans as one vast sea, that is the realm of 9 stars. She added that there were only 3 people on the entire continent who had reached this level, and only 1 within the empire. Karen immediately realized that this person was his grandfather. Hello. Sabina confirmed that the only 9-star expert on the continent was her brother, Hallo Listein. This statement ignited a flame of determination in Karen, who swore that in this life, he would definitely catch up to his grandfather. Sabina noticed this intense desire for power in the boy, and found him truly amusing, believing he would be worthy of training. Sabina began the mana training, ordering the boys to pour mana into the channels that were opened during the awakening ceremony, reminding them that the power of mana should not be controlled, but accepted. Sabina watched their mana waves, and Karen noticed that his mana waves were still a bit rough, and she guided him to start from the heart first. Sabina was immediately impressed by Karen's ability, wondering how this could be the power of someone who had just finished the awakening ceremony. She compared him to Leo, who had barely begun to approach the 2-star level, despite having received the Sea Overlord method 2 years ago. In contrast, Karen, without any instruction, was instinctively carving his own mana paths. Karen felt intense pressure as if his body were being torn apart, so he stopped cultivating on his own. Sabina initially thought his body was exhausted, but she realized he had masterfully adjusted his pace. At that moment, Leo collapsed from overusing his mana, and Sabina rushed to him, scolding him for forcing his mana. Sabina admitted to herself that she had been distracted by watching Karen. She saw that the role of adults was to prevent children from harming themselves due to their recklessness. Karen looked at Leo with disappointment, describing him as shameful. Sabina compared Leo to Karen, who had accurately assessed his limits and stopped before getting hurt. She was impressed by his self-control despite his desire for power, and began to wonder if this child really needed a lighthouse to guide him. Sabina addressed Karen, promising to ensure his safety for 3 years, asking him to focus on building his strength during this period so he could protect himself. Karen agreed enthusiastically. Later, in the dueling training ground, Leo approached Karen and asked if he planned to use the guillotine sword even in training. Karen replied, wondering if there was a problem with that, explaining that his grandfather had given him a special scabbard to contain the sword's aura. The new instructor approached them and introduced himself, who would be training the boys in swordsmanship. As the commander of the Sea Wolf Knights, Xeris Winterguard, Karen greeted Sir Xeris politely, noting to himself that he was an 8-star expert. Xeris told the boys he would not address them by the title Young Master until they earned the recognition of the Sea Wolf Knights. Karen replied that he didn't mind and found it more comfortable, adding that he was well aware that earning the respect of the Blue Wolves through skill is a tradition in the Liston family. Xeris was surprised by Karen's unusual reaction, noting that most nobles would have been offended. Sir Xeris initially thought that perhaps a serious and steadfast heir had finally arrived for the family after a long wait. But Karen was confidently thinking to himself that, in the end, everyone would bow before him. Upon noticing this aura, Xeris immediately changed his mind, concluding that the one who had arrived was not a serious heir, but someone worse than Leo, a true scoundrel. Meanwhile, Sabina was warning her brother, Hello, advising him to think about Karen's impact on the succession structure and what it would mean for Hello's own son. Hello wondered if his sister was implying that his son might be threatened by his nephew. Sabina clarified that if Karen's exceptional talent became known throughout the empire, it would obviously affect who would succeed him and what would happen next. Sabina was speaking with her brother, Hello, expressing her concern that their family might end now that the Oathstone had been shattered, especially with the number of demons coming from beyond the North Sea increasing significantly. Hello dismissed this idea as nonsense and revealed a secret prophecy known only to the head of the family. The person who breaks the stone will establish a new stone, just as their ancestor did long ago. Sabina realized this meant the time of the covenant was near. When she asked him when he would tell Karen this, Hello replied that it would happen when the time is right. In the winter, Bali was reading a letter from his son, Karen. Karen wrote to reassure his father of his well-being and told him about his training progress, having recently mastered the 4th form of 2 different swordsmanship styles. He also mentioned that he was trying to get along with his relatives as his father had asked, and that he was taking special care of Leo. At the end of the letter, he jokingly asked for more money because his allowance had run out, which made Bali laugh with affection. In a conversation with Heinrich, Bali recalled how worried he was when he first left Karen at the castle 3 years ago. Heinrich reassured him that Karen had adapted surprisingly well and that the castle was no longer quiet because of him. Although Bali tried to advise his son not to attract attention, Heinrich wisely replied that, a jewel will shine even if it stays in place. But Heinrich warned that the situation might change, as it would soon be impossible to prevent the news about Karen from spreading, and that as a blue wolf, he would have to carry out the tasks assigned to him. What worried Bali most was his brother's reaction to Karen's growing influence. Heinrich offered one last piece of advice to Bali, reminding him that Lady Sabina was very fond of Karen. Bali felt relieved to hear that. Bali expressed his feeling that the monthly allowance he sent had paid off, while Heinrich replied, expressing his happiness to see him joking and looking less worried. But Bali expressed his concern that his aunt would be leaving the castle soon. Heinrich reassured him again, explaining that Karen had formed a close relationship with the Sea Wolf Knights, to the point that they had given him a nickname, the Little Rabid Blue Sea Dog. In the training ground, Karen appeared, training intensely, easily overcoming a huge knight named Hans. Karen scolded him for his weakness, saying that the art of the Sea Wolf sword is useless if you are overcome by force, and that one must fight with strength even if their bones are broken. Hans surrendered, admitting that Karen was the only one who projected his strength, while Karen mocked his muscles, calling them balloon muscles. In the training ground, Hans admitted that the term balloon muscles was new to him, and acknowledged that without using mana, he was no longer a match for Karen now, lamenting how much strength the young man had gained in just 1 year. Hans then told Karen that he would likely be sent on a mission soon. Hans revealed that Sir Xeras would be the one to decide the mission's timing because Hello was currently in the capital, and he speculated that their destination would be the Celestial Dome region in the west of the duchy where demon appearances were increasing. Nearby, Leo was training anxiously, thinking that he didn't want to go on the same mission with Karen, but at the same time he hoped to make his parents happy if he did well. Back in the present, Bali revealed to Heinrich that the reason for his summons was not just Karen's letter. Bali gave him a small pouch, explaining that their territory's gate inspectors found it in a merchant's cart coming from the barony of Balos. Bali confirmed it was a drug called cocaine and asked him to investigate the matter of the barony of Balos, starting from the Blue Sea Castle. At the train station, someone got off the train wondering if this was the Blue Sea Castle. That night, Karen was wandering the castle grounds, after having snuck in and stolen a bottle of liquor from Xeras's collection, commenting to himself that messing with Xeras's collection was always exciting. As he was enjoying his drink, he heard a visitor asking the guard for Duke Listin on an urgent matter. The guard confirmed that the Duke was in the capital and that Knight Commander Xeras was in charge. Karen interjected in the conversation, and when the guard recognized him, the visitor introduced himself as the young Baron Rohan Belos. Rohan recognized Karen from the rumors he had heard about him. Although Rohan's aide suggested going to the Knight Commander, Karen insisted that he would be the one to listen to his story, arguing that it was a matter of courtesy for a noble from their side to receive a visitor who had come in person on an urgent matter. Karen ordered the guard to deliver a separate message to Xeras. Karen's political judgment impressed Rohan, though Rohan was concerned to see a boy holding a bottle of liquor. He then invited Rohan to follow. In a private room, Karen summarized Rohan's problem, the presence of a group of bandits in the eastern mountains of his barony. Rohan confirmed this, adding that these bandits were spreading drugs and kidnapping people to sell as slaves. Rohan explained with regret that his barony was poor and militarily weak, and that his father's attempt to confront the bandits had failed, and resulted in him being injured and bedridden. Karen slammed the liquor bottle on the table in anger, declaring that tearing these scoundrels to pieces was not enough punishment for them. But he pointed out a puzzling point, wondering how a mere group of bandits could be strong enough to fight a regular army. Rohan replied that they suspected these bandits might actually be deserters from the Southern Kingdom's army, which was currently at war. Karen analyzed the situation, concluding that after the evil emperor's abdication, the imperial army had focused its reduced resources on the war in the south, creating a security vacuum in the north. That allowed deserters to become bandits. Rohan agreed that this theory seemed the most plausible. Karen then offered Rohan a drink, explaining that the barony of Balos was adjacent to the fiefdom where his father resided, making this a personal matter for him as well, and he expressed his desire to help personally. Rohan felt grateful for this gesture, though he wondered to himself about the appropriateness of accepting a drink offered by a child. Karen cheerfully admitted that the drink was stolen from Sir Xeras's collection and asked Rohan to keep it a secret between them. Rohan was shocked to hear the name of the famous Knight Commander. At that very moment, Xeras entered the room and asked Karen if they hadn't agreed that he wouldn't touch his drink. Rohan got flustered and spilled his drink, but Xeras reassured him. Xeras addressed Rohan, confirming he had heard of his grave concern about the bandits, which Rohan confirmed was the reason he came to ask for help. As Xeras was about to reply, Karen interrupted him. Xeras turned to him, scolding him for drinking at his age, and took his drink away. Xeras apologized to the young baron for the scene, then reassured him that Blue Sea Castle would not stand idly by while an old partner suffered, and told him they were planning to organize and dispatch troops soon. Karen volunteered to go on the mission, but Xeras immediately refused, arguing that the enemy was a trained group and might have unknown skilled fighters. Rohan was surprised by Karen's seriousness in wanting to help. Xeras objected, knowing that real combat was different from training. Karen argued that being overprotective was not good, but Xeras insisted he would rather send him to face a clear danger in the west than an ambiguous one. At that, Karen smiled slyly and asked him what if he made him an offer he couldn't refuse. In a later scene at the train station, Leo was shocked at being forced to go on the mission, while Karen enthusiastically wrapped an arm around him, delighted that it was their first mission. Xerus, who was watching the scene, realized he had been tricked and that Karen had used Lady Sabina as leverage. Xerus thought that perhaps this was for the best, as a reliable guardian would accompany them. Xerus realized that his agreement to the condition of Lord Leo going implicitly meant his satisfaction with the results of their training. Baron Rohan was also present to see them off, and he was very worried about the safety of the Duke's grandsons and his family's responsibility if any harm came to them. Xerus tried to reassure him, and assured him that there was no need for him to worry, as he explained that with Sabina present, no harm would ever come to the boys. But Sabina interrupted him with a shocking statement, declaring that she did not intend to intervene unless the boys were in danger of death. This statement terrified Rohan and Leo. Xerus commented on her usual audacity, and Sabina hinted that there was a reason preventing her from standing on the front lines, something Xerus seemed to understand and accept. At the train station, Sabina noticed Leo trembling, so she addressed him, saying she understood his fear, but she urged him to consider this mission an opportunity to prove how serious he was about his training over the past 3 years, and a chance to gain recognition as a member of the Blue Wolves. Karen interjected with his sarcastic style, wondering if Leo always needed someone to push him from behind. Leo responded angrily, but Karen's words awakened his resolve, and he realized it was time to prove himself. The magic train departed from Blue Sea Castle heading to the barony of Belos. As the train moved away, Karen thought to himself that he hadn't expected this moment to come so quickly. On the train, Sabina explained to Baron Rohan why she couldn't appear on the front lines. Her presence at Blue Sea Castle was a secret, and if she were discovered, the bandits would disappear without a trace. However, Rohan remained concerned about sending only 2 children on this mission, as he noticed Karen showed no signs of tension, while Leo seemed extremely anxious. Meanwhile, Leo was remembering his mother's scolding. She had asked him how he could get close to Karen after the humiliation he suffered 3 years ago, which had stained his father's honor, assuring him that Karen was his rival, not his friend. When Leo remained silent, she called him a weak boy. Finally, Leo responded to his mother, explaining that Karen was not his rival. He explained the huge gap in talent between them, as Karen had reached the 4-star level at the age of 13, while he had only reached the 3-star level at the age of 15. Leo asserted that Karen was not his rival, but his goal that pushed him to work hard and move forward. His mother concluded their conversation by telling him that he only sees the trees, the competition, not the forest, the bigger picture. Back on the train, Sabina was talking to Leo, who admitted his nervousness as it was his first mission. Sabina asked him a direct question. Could he kill a man? Leo hesitated, but Sabina encouraged him, saying there was no need to doubt himself, and that she knew more than anyone how hard his training had been, reminding him that she was the one who trained him. Moved by her words, Leo addressed her as Master. The train announced its arrival in 20 minutes, so Sabina decided that during the mission, they would address each other as Master and Student. She then announced she would jump from the train to go ahead and scout the situation unnoticed. Rohan protested the danger of jumping from a moving train, but Sabina reassured him that he would not be held accountable for anything, because her nephews would be watching him from a distance. Karen commented with admiration on her audacity, and Sabina jumped from the train, leaving Rohan and Leo in a state of shock, wondering about the eccentricities of the Liston family. Upon their arrival at the barony of Belos, they were greeted by Rohan's father, the injured Baron Belos, who apologized for receiving them while seated due to his poor health. Karen replied politely, asking him not to worry about it, and asked about his injuries. Upon meeting the bedridden Baron Belos, the Baron thanked the boys for their concern and mentioned that he had met Karen and his father 10 years ago, commenting on how wonderfully he had grown, which must make his father proud. Karen, who was not comfortable with formalities, asked the Baron to speak simply with him, and the Baron agreed to call him Young Master Karen. The Baron showed keen insight, deducing that since Karen had been assigned his first mission, he must have reached the 4-star level in the martial arts at such a young age. The Baron expressed his confidence in the main house's judgment of the boy's abilities, but at the same time he felt concerned about sending 2 promising young men on such a dangerous mission. Karen reassured the Baron, saying he understood his concern, but failure in their missions would stain the honor of the Blue Wolves, and that they never consider failure. He then turned to Leo for confirmation, and Leo reluctantly agreed that they would definitely succeed. The Baron laughed and thanked them for their confidence. Karen noticed that the Baron needed rest and announced that they would be leaving. The Baron entrusted the matter to them and told them he had prepared a guide for them to follow. The boys set off with the guide through the snowy mountains. Karen mocked Leo, wondering if he was already tired, but Leo ignored him and expressed his distrust of the guide, pointing out that there was no guarantee he wasn't colluding with the bandits. Karen sarcastically congratulated him on finally being able to think, then calmly confirmed that Leo's suspicions were correct, and that the guide was most likely one of the bandits. Leo was shocked and asked how he knew. Karen explained that he had overheard Baron Rohan's conversation at the station. In a flashback, Rohan's aide asked how they would locate the bandits' hideout, and Rohan replied that they would have to use a traitor within the domain. When Leo asked him why he hadn't told him earlier, Karen replied that he had been tense all day. Karen then analyzed the situation, pointing out Rohan's cunning in deliberately using the traitor against them, and explained to Leo that their current role was to be bait, as their kidnapping as young nobles would fetch a high ransom. Karen explained to Leo that the fact the traitor remained unpunished and alive until now was proof of this, which meant they had reached the point of desperation. The guide, Sven, led them into an ambush set by the bandit leader, who rewarded him with an extra sum because the targets were young nobles. One of the bandits noted that the two young men didn't look like they would follow them obediently. Karen and Leo stood ready to fight, and Karen declared with intense anger that he would not forgive them for spreading drugs in his father's land. Back at the Baron's residence, Rohan asked his father if he was okay. His father reassured him of his health. Rohan offered his father a cup of water, and the concerned Rohan asked his father if the two young men would be all right. The Baron father replied that Blue Sea Castle sending the boys without sufficient information was proof enough of their confidence in their abilities. He then added that Karen reminded him of Duke Hello's younger days, not just in appearance but in his confident demeanor and his calm and dignified attitude. At the Baron's residence, Baron Belos expressed his confidence to his son, saying it was right to place expectations on the two boys. Meanwhile, in the snowy mountains, Karen was engaged in a fierce battle, skillfully and supernaturally beheading bandits. Leo watched the scene in horrified silence, thinking to himself that Karen was a true monster. The bandit deputy leader apprehensively told the leader that they were not ordinary people and that they should withdraw to inform the main force. This angered the bandit leader, who refused to be defeated by a green boy and rushed towards Karen with a red aura. But Karen met him coolly, describing his war cry as annoying, and then split him in half with a single blow. Leo was stunned, while Karen casually commented that he had accidentally used a powerful technique. Karen complained that the leader had stained his clothes. One of the surviving bandits, named Orha, was terrified by Karen's power and the aura of his sword that almost overwhelmed him, so he surrendered immediately. With a sly smile, Karen asked Orha if he had a rope and ordered him to bring it. To Leo's astonishment, Karen had Orha tie him and Leo up, and arm him with their swords as well. Leo asked why they were going to such lengths, and Karen explained that to be effective bait and uncover the bandits' base, their capture had to be convincing, as it was illogical for two nobles to be captured by a single unarmed man. As they walked, Karen began to interrogate their prisoner, Orha. The terrified Orha confessed that they were indeed deserters from the kingdom of Caius in the southern war zone. Karen asked him about their number in the fortress. Orha informed him that there were 130 of them, including 2 mages and their guard knights. Orha realized at that moment the magnitude of his mistake, and that the ones he had captured were not just ordinary nobles, but heirs to the great Liston family. Karen found Orha's story that their leader had promised them easy money to be illogical. He wondered why an elite like mages would be with a simple infantry captain, and why they would choose the poor barony of Belos to carry out robberies. Karen concluded that the story made no sense, and decided they had to see the truth with their own eyes. Upon reaching the bandits' hideout, they were greeted with surprise by other guards who wondered why Orha had brought hostages with him. At the entrance of the bandits' hideout, the guards questioned Orha about why he returned alone and with weapons. Orha claimed he took the weapons from the young masters as his loot, and that his other comrades were chasing the escapees. The guards mocked him but opened the gate. Inside, Karen commented to himself that these deserters seemed lax, but he felt a strange power that had been unsettling him the whole way, and his sword guillotine began to react to it. He soon discovered the source of his unease: bird carcasses hanging as sacrifices, and a large black magic circle on the ground. Karen immediately ordered Orha to untie him and give him his sword, then told the astonished Leo to draw his sword Sylphid, warning him that he would need it soon. At that moment, the magic circle was activated and armed skeletons began to rise from the ground, causing Orha to panic. The bandit leader appeared and mockingly welcomed the hostages for entering his mountain stronghold. Karen searched for the black mage with his eyes but couldn't find him, concluding he was hiding somewhere. Quickly he grabbed Orha as a hostage, putting the sword to his neck and threatening to kill him if the bandits attacked. Leo was shocked by this act, which he considered a breach of noble honor. The bandit leader mocked Karen, asking if nobles weren't supposed to value honor above all else. Karen retorted, wondering why he shouldn't be allowed to do so. The leader found Karen interesting but declared that the hostage was worthless, and that Orha was completely useless. giving Karen permission to do as he pleased with him. The leader pushed Orha towards Karen. As Leo realized they were trapped, he asked Karen for his plan. Karen replied confidently that the plan was simple. They just had to eliminate the leader. The leader noticed Karen's blue mana aura and looked worried. Karen told Leo that he would take care of the leader and that Leo had to deal with the skeletons. Before Leo could process what that meant, Karen charged powerfully towards the leader, leaving Leo alone to face the army of skeletons that had fully risen. Panic struck Leo as he was surrounded by the skeletal soldiers, wondering how he was supposed to deal with all of them on his own. As the skeletons advanced to attack him, Karen had already reached the leader and unleashed a powerful strike, shouting, "Third form of the Sea Wolf Sword." Karen directed his sword's energy towards the leader. After Karen's strike hit the leader and severed his hand, the latter fell in pain and called Karen a damned brat. Karen mocked him, saying that if he was going to attack, he should have done it sooner. The leader wondered why Blue Sea Castle was interfering in their affairs, and Karen explained that this barony was next to his father's lands, and told him he didn't intend to kill him but would take him to the castle. Meanwhile, Leo was fighting the skeletons with surprisingly good performance. From a distance, Karen was watching him and encouraging him to keep fighting with pure strength as the art of the Sea Wolf Sword teaches them. Karen returned to the wounded leader, Michael Knox, and asked for his name again to be sure. After he answered, Karen mercilessly stabbed him in the leg to force him into submission. With a chilling smile, he ordered him to command his men to drop their weapons, which the leader did in agony. The defeated Michael lamented his defeat at the hands of two brats, but he warned Karen that when they arrive, not even someone from the Liston family would be able to handle them. Karen correctly guessed that the leader was pinning his hopes on the Black Mages. Karen mocked the leader's hopes, wondering if he really thought the Liston family would send just 2 children alone. He pointed out that the magic circle had disappeared, explaining that it was natural for them to have a guardian. At that moment, a massive explosion roared in the distance. Karen commented that because they wasted time with the leader, they couldn't capture the Black Mage alive. Sabina suddenly appeared, holding the severed head of the Black Mage. Leo was disgusted by the sight, while Sabina officially declared the mission a failure because they let the most important clue slip away, the living mage. Karen brazenly asked his aunt if she was at least impressed with his methods. Sabina responded by beating the defeated leader until he lost consciousness. Then she scolded Karen for his recklessness and for rushing into enemy territory without thinking, saying he was just like her older brother, Hello, but she admitted she would give him extra points for this audacity befitting a member of the Liston family, while points would be deducted for resorting to taking a hostage. When she asked him why, Karen explained that he wanted to exploit their weakness, as they would never expect a noble to take a hostage. Sabina found this reasoning amusing and laughed, calling him a crazy boy the likes of whom she'd never met, while the captured leader thought to himself, what a bunch of crazy bastards. Sabina announced that they would now return to Baron Belos's castle because there would be a lot of questions. As they were leaving the battlefield, the captured villagers were released from their cages and touching family reunions began. After the battle, as families reunited with their freed loved ones, Karen noticed the bandit Orha standing aside, feeling guilty. Karen mockingly asked him if he was feeling a prick of conscience. Karen told Orha it was too early for that. For all he knew, he could end up locked in the barony's dungeon like his comrades. He then told him he would be taken to Blue Sea Castle with his captain instead of being imprisoned in the barony. Leo asked how safe it was to leave Orha untied. Karen explained they needed him to help carry their wounded captain, but he warned Leo not to let his guard down. At that moment, one of the rescued villagers approached them and spoke in Orha's defense, wondering if he would be punished too. The villager explained that Orha had sincerely cared for the prisoners, secretly bringing medicine to the sick and giving his own food to the hungry, and pleaded with them to show him mercy. Sabina turned to Karen for his opinion. Karen looked at the shocked Orha, then decided they would consider showing him leniency, justifying it by the fact that he had guided them to the hideout. Gratitude overwhelmed Orha, and he swore his complete loyalty to Karen until death. Leo interrupted the scene, calling Karen to see something important. Leo led him to a barrel, containing a huge, glowing magic stone, while the villagers celebrated and hurled insults at the captured bandits. Leo was sure the young master would prepare a feast for them upon their return. Karen was deep in thought. He finally realized the real reason for the large group of bandits in this poor and remote area. A magic stone mine that the Baron's family themselves didn't know existed. Leo noticed the scheming look on his cousin's face and asked him what plot he was hatching now. Baron Rohan and his father arrived to greet the rescuers. Rohan ordered the prisoners to be thrown in the dungeon, asking Sabina to hand over the bandit leader. But Sabina, claiming she was just a guardian, directed him to her students, Karen and Leo. Rohan invited everyone to a modest banquet, but Karen declined, saying they had to leave for Blue Sea Castle immediately. At that point, Rohan brought up the matter of the mission fee, admitting that his barony lacked the resources to pay it in full and requested a deferral of payment. Karen's expression changed to a cunning look, and he began to deliberately insult the barony, describing it as a remote area among remote areas, which provoked Rohan. Karen then announced that the bandits were after something else entirely. Karen revealed the magic stone to the astonished Rohan, who admitted he had no idea there was a mine on his lands. With all the cards in his hand, Karen announced that he too had a proposal to make. Karen presented his proposal to Baron Rohan, that Blue Sea Castle would jointly develop the magic stone mine with the barony of Balos, on the condition that the castle provide the initial capital and security forces. Rohan was internally shocked, wondering if this boy truly realized the magnitude of the words he was speaking, but he quickly realized that having the powerful Liston family as a partner in his barony's mine would in itself be a huge gain. Rohan concluded that Karen had calculated all these things, and he marveled at a child's audacity to conduct negotiations of this importance. Karen added that this arrangement could allow for the establishment of a Liston Knights garrison in the barony, which would solve the defense problem and achieve economic growth at the same time. When Rohan asked him about the share percentage he had in mind, Karen cleverly dodged, saying it was unreasonable for a child like him to discuss the fine details of such a project, and that this was a matter for Rohan to discuss with his father. Rohan agreed to consult his father and contact them soon. Later, Karen asked Lady Sabina why she expected things to get complicated at the bandits' hideout. Sabina explained that the reason was the black mage she dealt with, revealing he wasn't just any ordinary mage, but Tad Delahada, a second-degree wanted criminal in the Empire and a sixth circle mage. Sabina scolded the boys for getting preoccupied with the small fish, the bandits, and ignoring the more important target. Sabina continued her lesson, explaining that true strength only grows by facing strong opponents, and that if they had defeated the black mage themselves, they wouldn't have wasted their time with rabble. For this reason, she considered the mission a failure, a judgment Karen accepted respectfully. She then turned to Leo, who felt he had been ignored, and unexpectedly praised him, saying his performance was much better than she had expected, especially since it was his first time facing the undead. She encouraged him to be more confident in himself. At Blue Sea Castle, Hello returned from the capital. His retinue greeted him and informed him of the knight's return from the west, and that Karen, Leo, and Sabina were on their way back from their mission. Suddenly, a messenger arrived with an urgent message from the imperial palace. Hello opened the letter and was shocked by its contents, as the emperor had mentioned nothing of the sort before he left the capital. His Majesty the Emperor had personally invited his grandson, Karen, to the capital. On the returning train, Orha was carrying his captive captain, Michael. Michael tried to persuade Orha to escape together, taking advantage of what he considered a security lapse. But Orha angrily struck him and refused, reminding him that he was the one who called him useless and disposable. Upon their return to Blue Sea Castle, they were greeted by family members. Bali sarcastically commented that Karen's surroundings were still as chaotic as ever, to which Karen retorted sharply, threatening him. Bali warmly welcomed his son, while Sabina spoke with him, concluding that her brother, Hello, had likely summoned him, because of the trouble Karen had caused in the barony of Balos. Meanwhile, Bali was congratulating his nephew Leo on his great achievement, noting that the news had preceded him. Leo felt happy, believing his father and grandfather would be proud of him. Then Karen announced he was tired and would go up to rest. The conversation took a serious turn, as Sabina asked Bali if he knew anything about the unusual political situation in the empire. Bali explained that the other great powers, except for their family, were rapidly uniting, centered around the Salmon Duchy and the Diaz Marquisate. Sabina added that their father, Hello, had planned to meet with several families in the capital to assess the situation, but he cancelled everything because his talks with the emperor did not yield a satisfactory result. Bali explained that these two families were the ones who contributed to the overthrow of the previous emperor and the installation of the current one, and that they now control the system. Sabina lamented that her brother, Hello, had decided to withdraw from central power for the future of the empire, only to be met with this treatment now. The two concluded that the era of peace was nearing its end, and that it was time for their family to make a move. Sabina saw a positive side to the situation, pointing out that what Karen had done might be the most useful thing for them at the moment, as it gives them a justified reason to expand their influence by sending troops to the lands of other families. She described Karen as an interesting boy because he did something beneficial for the family at the perfect time. Bali told his aunt that she praises him too much, to which she replied that she wasn't really praising him. Later, Sir Xerus greeted them, congratulating them on their achievements in subduing the fugitive bandits. He announced that he would immediately begin interrogating the bandit leader whom Orha was carrying, vowing to extract every piece of information from him. When he asked about Orha's identity, Karen explained that for the time being, he was also considered a bandit. But since he had been an informant, he should be treated gently and then released, announcing that he planned to make him his personal servant, which Zeras agreed to. When the boys tried to go rest, Zeras stopped them, reminding them that their mission was not yet complete. Karen asked Zeras when he arrived, and he replied that he had arrived not long ago, and that they must write a report. When Karen asked if they had to write separate reports, Zeras allowed them to write it together. Karen immediately tried to palm the task off on Leo, arguing that he had done all the hard work. He then resorted to persuasion, pointing out that their uncle Tiles would read the report, and that this was Leo's chance to score points for himself by focusing on his achievements in the report, which convinced Leo. After their return, Sir Zeras ordered the prisoners to be locked up, while Sabina threw him the head of the wanted criminal, saying the boys' reports would be sufficient. As Karen wished Leo good luck with writing the report, he announced that he was going to the Manhwa training room to use the 4th form he had recently reached, leaving Zeras astonished at his unyielding passion. Meanwhile, Hello held an emergency family council meeting. He explained that the reason for the meeting was information obtained during the suppression of demons that had recently appeared around the castle. He asked Heinrich to summon the Knight Commander. Zeras was summoned and presented him with a piece of demon skin. Hello told them that this piece was collected from the western Celestial Dome region. Hello noted that the dark mana latent in the skin was not ordinary, and realized with a shock that it belonged to the fallen emperor. Hello proposed 2 possibilities. Either it was merely his will lingering in the world, or the fallen emperor was still alive. Hello deduced that this matter was connected to the ongoing events in the empire, then revealed another development. News of the events in the barony of Belos had reached the emperor's ears, who had extended a personal invitation for Karen to come to the capital. Hello announced his plan to send Leo and the Seawolf Knights to accompany Karen, but he stressed that he would ask for Karen's opinion first and would not force him to go as he was still a child. Most importantly, Hello wanted to understand what Karen was thinking when he made that deal with Baron Belos, so he ordered Zeras to bring him. Zeras found Karen meditating in the training room. Karen asked Zeras when he had arrived, and he replied that he had arrived not long ago. Karen told him that besides the immediate family, Sir Zeras was the only one allowed to enter, but he didn't remember Zeras ever entering the training room before, which meant it must be urgent. Zeras informed him of his summons to the family council to discuss an impending trip to the capital. Zeras replied that the head of the family had summoned Lord Karen to the family council, and that he would hear the details directly from him. Upon Karen's arrival at the council, Hello told Karen that he had just learned of his first mission's successful conclusion, to which the other confirmed. Hello told him that he immediately questioned him about why he acted independently, and overstepped his authority in negotiating with the House of Belos, wondering if he had considered that his arrogant behavior might be a great insult to them. Karen realized this was an interrogation, not praise, but he denied the charge, explaining that he had only made a single proposal to the young Baron Belos, and that the latter had accepted the offer of his own free will. In the council hall, Karen defended his actions before his grandfather, explaining that he had judged there was something more important than noble etiquette. When Hello asked him what could be more important than courtesy, Karen replied that it was the honor of the family. This response deeply impressed Hello, who thought to himself that Karen could have boasted about the gains from the deal and taken credit for himself, but instead he put the family's interest first, describing this act as splendid conduct. Based on this, Hello announced his decision. He acknowledged that the deal Karen had brought would greatly benefit the family, and he tasked his son Bali with handling the formal negotiations. Bali agreed to leave for the barony of Belos at dawn the next day, to which Hello commented that a father bringing glory through his son's merits was not a bad thing. Hello then moved on to the next topic, the Emperor's letter, and formally informed Karen that His Majesty had summoned him, as news of him had reached the capital. Karen deduced that, according to Zeras, the Emperor's letter had already arrived before Hello's return to Blue Sea Castle, and then wondered to himself if the Emperor's intelligence network really had such capability. Karen thought about it, concluding that the influential nobles controlling the puppet Emperor were the ones behind this swift invitation, not the Emperor himself. Hello offered Karen the option not to go. Hello thought about Karen, believing he must have already realized what going to the capital at this time meant. Hello began to think about the strategic implications of accepting or refusing. Bali knew that Hello should not have given the choice to Karen, but Karen interrupted them, declaring that since the Emperor was the one who summoned him, it was his duty to go, adding that this would be an opportunity to see his maternal grandfather again. When Karen asked if he would go alone, Hello confirmed that Leo would accompany him, in addition to Hans's squad as guards. Karen questioned the need for separate guards with his grandfather present, so Hello shouted jokingly that the guards were not to protect him, but to control the trouble he might cause. And Hello announced that the departure time would be in 3 days. In a later scene, Bali concluded his negotiations with Baron Rohan, It was agreed to divide the mine's shares with 80% for the Liston family and 20% for the Belos family. But Bali was puzzled by an additional condition he found hard to understand, allocating 5% of Belos's share, a quarter of their share, directly to Karen and Leo, considering this amount excessive for a mere commission. He asked Rohan, a distinguished graduate of the Imperial Academy, the reason for this decision. Rohan frankly explained that this condition was an investment, to win the favor of the two young wolves who would one day lead Blue Sea Castle. Bali saw Rohan as arrogant for thinking he had grasped the talents of these children and considered it extremely rude. Bali and Rohan exchanged some sharp words, with Bali praising his audacity. Finally, the boys were summoned, and they gratefully accepted the offer, and Rohan expressed his family's honor in this partnership. As they were leaving, Leo had a question for Karen. After sealing the deal with the barony of Belos, Leo asked Karen how they would divide their 5% share. Karen coolly replied that naturally, he would get 9/10, while Leo would get 1/10. Leo was shocked by this proposal, but Karen confronted him with a threat, prompting the terrified Leo to agree immediately. Bali and his aide were watching the scene, and the aide commented that the two boys, who used to fight fiercely in their childhood, had now become inseparable. Upon arriving in the capital, Leo was excited and nervous, admitting that he had only heard rumors about the place and didn't know how to act. Karen reassured him, but Leo protested that he was about to meet the emperor and his excitement was justified. Then he began to dream of going to social parties to meet the beauties of the capital. Decus. Sabina, who had overheard their conversation, joined them and commented that Decus was an interesting place full of strong fighters and that it would be a good experience for them. She then asked for wine glasses to congratulate them on their first mission, and with sarcasm from Karen, who pointed out the lack of wine glasses in a 13-year-old boy's room, she poured the wine into water cups. Sabina asked Leo if he had tasted wine before, and he admitted that Karen had given him some before. Sabina offered Leo a glass, and he accepted it. Sabina raised her glass, praising their remarkable growth, and Karen thanked her as his teacher. She then announced that the 3 years she had promised to protect them were now over, expressing her regret that she would not be able to see the trouble they would stir up in the capital. Leo was saddened to hear that she would soon be returning to the North Sea and asked if that meant they would not see her again. Sabina scoffed at his sensitivity, then advised him not to go to parties with Karen, explaining that Karen's appearance, talent, and honeyed tongue would attract all the attention. Leo panicked and asked Karen not to get in the way of his chances of marriage, which led Karen to call him an idiot. Karen ordered Leo to stop talking and continue drinking. Later, at Blue Sea Castle, Bali informed Hello of the successful conclusion of the negotiations with Belos. Hello was amazed at their agreement to cede part of their share to Karen and Leo. Bali explained that the young baron's opinion had a strong influence, as he described the deal as an investment in the future. Hello praised the young baron's intelligence and considered that they had gained a reliable ally. Hello entrusted all matters related to the barony of Belos to Bali, but Bali felt there was another reason for his summons, as his father was stingy with praise. His intuition was correct, as Hello revealed that the emperor's summons for Karen was highly unusual, as he had never summoned any member of the family other than Hello himself. Then Hello revealed a disturbing observation. During his private meeting with the emperor, he saw the look of fear of him still in his majesty's eyes. Hello continued his conversation with Bali, explaining that the emperor's fear of him made him believe there was an external influence behind Karen's invitation. Bali agreed that the matter seemed politically motivated and wondered why Hello hadn't refused the emperor's request in this complex political situation. Hello explained that he didn't refuse, because he was curious about the extent of Karen's potential. He explained that Karen had been chosen by the founding ancestor's sword, guillotine, which meant he was destined to be at the center of the family, and would thus inevitably face countless challenges and dangers from external forces. Hello considered this invitation a test. If Karen was to carry the family's future on his shoulders, he must be able to withstand such trials. Hello then asked his son, Bali, if he was worried. Bali was deeply moved but composed himself, and declared with confidence that he believed in his son. Hello was surprised by the response, then smiled, considering it a wonderful answer. The next day, Sabina was preparing to return to the North Sea. Xeris asked her if she was going to say goodbye to the boys, but she said it wasn't necessary because she had enjoyed sharing his stolen wine with them the previous night, and it was better to leave quietly as the boys were busy preparing for their journey. They exchanged farewells, and Xeris promised to provide more wine for her next visit. Before she left, Sabina exchanged a silent glance with Karen, who was watching her from his window. Then she departed, bidding him farewell until their next meeting. Karen thought that the North Sea was like a home to him. He thought about finding some food and wine while he waited. He didn't think Sabina would leave so quickly. As soon as Sabina left, Karen thought that his uncles would now start to make their moves. As if fate were responding to his thoughts, His uncle Tiles suddenly appeared behind him, startling him. At the train station, servants were carrying the young men's luggage. Leo wondered about the reason for all the fuss, and Heinrich explained that it was normal because they were going to meet the Emperor as representatives of their family. Karen grumbled about Hans's squad being with them, and Xerus explained their purpose was to protect them, but Hans rudely replied that the purpose was to make sure they didn't cause trouble. Before leaving, Tiles visited Karen in his room. After they greeted each other, Tiles confirmed he had heard about his trip to the capital, then told him he had one request for him. Tiles asked Karen not to act in the capital the same way he acts at Blue Sea Castle. Karen agreed, but realized to himself that his uncle was openly admitting to have been watching him all this time. Tiles warned him that the capital was full of enemies waiting for a chance to bring their family down, and that if Karen gave them any pretext, he would personally punish him severely. As soon as Tiles left, Karen's expression changed. He scoffed at his uncle's threat, realizing he was trying to pressure him with his status as the firstborn son, and vowed to himself that he would turn the tables on his arrogant uncle's face. At the train station, the preparations for departure were complete. Karen was bickering with Hans when Orha, the former bandit, approached them and thanked him for giving him another chance. Karen replied coolly, then cruelly joked that he would only take him to the capital to throw him in its brutal prison, reminding him not to slack off. Orha begged Karen not to abandon him, to which Karen replied that they would see how he behaved. Xerus gave the boys one last piece of advice, telling them not to cause trouble and to return safely. As the train was about to depart, Bali rushed onto the platform to see his son off. He explained that he came because he wanted to see him again before he left, and told him that his maternal grandfather was also looking forward to his arrival. Bali hugged his son, asking him to return safely, and to try to keep trouble to a minimum, which made Karen laugh. After the train left, while Tiles was in his office, he received information that his second son, Raphael's wife, was plotting something in the capital, but he decided not to take any action for the time being. On the train, Karen asked Hans about the duration of the journey, and he replied that it takes about 6 hours through the autonomous territory of Teba. They talked about Teba, the unusual city where commoners directly elect their mayor, and where commerce and industry flourish more than agriculture, making money the basis of status there. Hans explained that their influence within the empire comes from their vast capital, yet they are closely monitored by other provincial lords. Karen explained that he realized some citizens of the province sometimes flee the tyranny of corrupt lords to autonomous regions. Hans added that the region was friendly to Blue Sea Castle and often entrusted their knights with major tasks. As the boys expressed their desire to secretly visit the city later, Karen suddenly felt something strange, as his sword began to react to an unknown presence. Karen suddenly felt a strange reaction from his sword and realized this meant the sword was sensing imminent danger. He initially wondered if one of his uncles, Tiles or Raphael, had planted someone among the escorts to attack him, but he quickly dismissed the idea, realizing they weren't foolish enough to make such a move. Leo noticed Karen's strange state and called his name, while Karen concluded that the threat must be coming from outside. Urgently, Karen ordered Hans to contact the autonomous territory of Teba immediately. As Hans wondered about the reason for this sudden order, Karen yelled that there was no time to explain and ordered him to inform the other cars to prepare for an imminent attack. The stunned Hans immediately complied, relaying the warning to all escorts who acknowledged receipt and prepared for the attack. Meanwhile, Karen was thinking about the nature of this external threat, wondering how anyone could attack a moving train. Not far from the train's path, a group of masked attackers was preparing to execute their plan. Their leader announced that the time had come, and his men began to move quickly. As the train approached, they hurried to place explosive barrels tied with a fuse on the railway. Once finished, one of them lit the fuse while the leader warned everyone to prepare for the explosion. The train collided with the barrels, resulting in a massive explosion that derailed and destroyed the train. Meanwhile, in the autonomous territory of Teba, the mayor was presiding over a noisy meeting. The attendees were loudly exchanging accusations, with some accusing others of money laundering and that the National Tax Service was vigorously pursuing them, while others defended themselves by accusing the other party of the same offenses. The argument escalated and someone demanded the mayor punish his opponents, whom he called criminals. The mayor wished he hadn't attended the meeting, thinking to himself that he should have retired after serving as finance minister, feeling sorry that the city had turned into a chaotic arena and a constant struggle between the noble and commoner guilds. An aide interrupted the meeting with an urgent message for the mayor, who allowed him to approach after dismissing the bickering attendees. One of the remaining attendees asked if the news was about the tax investigation, but the mayor calmly replied, lighting a cigarette, that this petty investigation no longer mattered at all. When asked if the investigation had been cancelled, he replied, no, saying the investigation could go to hell. He then revealed the shocking news. 5 minutes ago, the train heading to the capital from the Liston family's territory had exploded, and the Grand Duke's 2 grandsons were on board. The man was stunned, and the mayor calmly explained that the meaning of this incident was that they were all as good as dead. Back at the crash site, Karen rose from the wreckage. Hans worriedly asked if he was injured, and Karen replied that it was just minor scratches. Hans immediately requested a status report, and the response came that out of the 11 people, there was one serious injury to someone named Dell, and 2 minor injuries. Then another report came from Orha's squad, stating 2 deaths among their ranks. Karen noted that the situation must be very serious, since a low-ranking member like Orha was giving the report. Karen asked Hans about their current location, and Hans replied that they were about 10 kilometers from the autonomous territory of Teba. Hans explained that the territory had already been contacted before the 2 young men woke up, and that help should be on its way. Hans then urged Karen and Leo to flee as far as possible, assuring them that his squad would buy them time. But Karen's sword, Guillotine, reacted again, and he realized they were not alone, and that an ambush awaited them. Karen rejected Hans's suggestion to flee, apologizing and telling him it wasn't possible. When Hans asked why, Karen explained that these attackers had destroyed the Emperor's precious railway, which was nothing less than an act of rebellion. He wondered how far they could run from people with such audacity. He then turned to Leo and asked if he could still fight, which Leo enthusiastically agreed to. Karen concluded that there was only one option left. As one of the masked attackers staggered from a surprise blow, Karen appeared behind him with a confident smile. Karen declared that they all must be killed and began the attack. The attacker's leader noted that the number of defenders was more than he expected, so Hans ordered the second squad to get off the cars and form a defensive line to protect the young masters. Hans informed Karen that every enemy attacker was at least a 3-star level, while Karen noted that their leader standing at the front exuded the aura of a 6-star fighter. The leader called him by his name, Karen Listein, and ordered him to drop his weapon and surrender. Karen noticed the leader's voice was magically altered. Then the leader offered to let the knights and servants live in peace if he cooperated quietly. From this offer, Karen deduced and told Hans that the attacker's goal was to capture him alive. He asked him if he realized what that meant. Hans understood what Karen was implying and begged him not to do it. But Karen shouted, wondering why he was stopping him, and declared that since they couldn't kill him, it meant he was the one who could kill them. Leo sighed at his cousin's recklessness, while Hans ordered all squads to engage, to protect the 2 young masters. A fierce battle broke out, with the Listein knights forming a defensive circle around the 2 young men as they fought the attackers fiercely. The clash between the knights and the masked men escalated, and the battle between them intensified. Karen was attacking the masked men, moving between them one by one. Karen mocked the attackers' hesitation to approach him and offered to go to them himself. At that, the leader ordered his men to fall back, declaring he would handle Karen himself. Karen commented that the boss had finally decided to show up, but Hans stepped in front of him, telling him to back down because this opponent was too dangerous. The leader mocked Hans, calling him a sea knight, rushing to his death. Hans retorted defiantly that they would see who would die, and charged at him, letting out a war cry. The clash between Hans and the masked attacker leader began. The leader launched a fierce attack, but Hans managed to block it with difficulty, surprised at his ability to deflect such a powerful blow. Through the leader's fighting moves, Hans realized his identity, wondering if he was the 6-star knight from the Sultanate of Bavar, Sion Hakimi. Hans was confused as to why a knight from the Sultanate of Bavar was in the Empire's territory, especially with a non-aggression pact between the 2 countries. He also wondered why he was specifically targeting the Listein family, as there was no significant animosity between the duchy and the Sultanate. Despite his confusion, Hans decided he would find out the truth for himself, feeling confident because the tide of the battle was turning in their favor, as the 2 young masters were also fighting well. But in a moment of distraction, Hakimi seized the opportunity and dealt a powerful blow to Hans. Hakimi mocked Hans for letting his focus waver, pointing out that his knight's formation had already collapsed. Hans retorted angrily as he gathered his strength, but Hakimi struck him again and told him that resistance was futile and offered him to surrender. Hakimi looked around and saw that his knights had already been defeated and that his formation had crumbled. Hans offered Hakimi and his men a chance to surrender, assuring them he would guarantee their lives and asking them about the point of dying in a foreign land. Hakimi refused, declaring that he would simply carry out his mission. Suddenly, he unleashed his power violently, causing the mana in his body to recoil. Hans realized that Hakimi did not fear death, and that this reckless move would endanger the 2 young masters. Hans felt he had no choice but to match his opponent's recklessness and unleash his full power to confront him. At that crucial moment, Karen's voice was heard expressing his disappointment in Hans. Karen suddenly appeared, reminding Hans that his primary mission was to prevent him from causing trouble. He then sarcastically asked if he was about to surrender already. Hakimi turned towards Karen, who proudly confirmed his identity, declaring he was Karen Listein. In a swift move, Karen lunged at Hakimi and defeated him with a single fatal blow. As Hakimi was breathing his last, he called Karen a monster. Karen coolly thanked him for the compliment, but he suddenly noticed his sword, guillotine, vibrating again. Karen realized this meant the danger was not over yet and accused the dying Hakimi of having one last trick. Hakimi replied that he felt no regret towards Karen and offered him a cryptic apology as an explosive energy began to surround his body. Karen was shocked, and at that moment, Hans yelled, ordering all knights to protect Lord Leo, who was standing stunned in the middle of the battle. Without hesitation, Hans threw himself in front of Karen to shield him from the imminent explosion. Karen yelled, asking what was happening, and Hans told him that Hakimi had used a self-destruction spell. As the explosion began, Hans apologized to Karen, considering what had happened to be due to his own incompetence. In his final moments, the dying Hans pleaded with Karen to save his own life. A massive explosion followed, devastating the surrounding area. In the midst of the chaos, Karen heard a mysterious voice scolding the foolish human who dared to awaken it. The voice announced that since it had tasted the blood of knights for the first time in a while, it would do its part, advising Karen to close his eyes tightly so his eyeballs wouldn't explode. After the smoke cleared, Karen found Hans unconscious on the ground and tried to wake him. Hans woke up angry, scolding Karen for his indifference after he had sacrificed himself to protect him. Karen coolly retorted, asking who had asked him to be saved in that manner. Another voice coming from Karen's sword interrupted them, mocking them and saying that if it weren't for it, Karen wouldn't have survived, and that he should have thanked it. Karen was shocked when he realized his sword was talking. He looked around at the immense destruction caused by the explosion and wondered what had happened. Karen asked the sword if it was an ego sword, a type of sword made from the souls of mad blacksmiths. The sword became enraged by the comparison and threatened to cut off Karen's neck if he repeated it. Karen wondered why it saved him if it intended to kill him for something so trivial. The sword angrily explained that it had used all the mana it had stored to save him from the explosion, and if not for that, it would have already cut off his neck. The sword then complained of exhaustion, and wondered if there was another way to absorb mana besides fighting enemies, suggesting it could also absorb mana from Karen's blood. Karen concluded that since the sword craved its master's blood, it must be a demonic sword. At that moment, a group of knights arrived. Their commander introduced himself as Haley, commander of the Teba Self-Defense Forces. Hans stepped forward and introduced himself to Haley. As they were talking, Karen sheathed his sword. The sword complained that it couldn't talk while inside, to which Karen replied that was wonderful and told it to sleep quietly. Haley recognized Karen as the grandson of the Grand Duke Hallo and expressed his region's full responsibility for the unfortunate incident. He explained that he had come on the mayor's orders to escort the ducal family members to safety. Karen agreed and asked him to take care of the many wounded. While riding in the carriage, Hans asked Karen if he was sure he didn't want to return to Blue Sea Castle, pointing out that the danger might not be over and that the on-site investigations would take time. Karen reassured Hans and told him he had already contacted Sir Xerus, and there was no need to worry excessively. He then changed the subject, asking Hans if he knew the identity of the man who blew himself up. Hans replied that the man was Sween Hakimi, a 6-star knight from the Sultanate of Bavar. Karen began to think about the gravity of the situation, wondering if the non-aggression pact his grandfather had personally signed with the Sultanate was now in jeopardy. Leo admitted that the relationship between the Empire and the Sultanate had been deteriorating, but it hadn't reached a point to justify such an attack. Karen concluded that Hakimi's action alone was sufficient justification to declare war. In the carriage, Karen noticed Leo staring at his blood-stained hands in a state of shock. Leo admitted he hadn't heard what Karen said earlier, wondering confusedly why his hands were trembling. Karen explained that his reaction was normal, as this was the first time he had killed someone, and getting used to taking lives is difficult. But he told Leo that he must overcome this feeling, because this is the nature of life. A short while later, a guard announced that they would soon be arriving in the autonomous territory of Teba. Upon entering the city, Karen looked out the window and commented to himself on how lavish and luxurious its buildings were. The mayor warmly greeted them, welcoming them to the territory of Teba. The mayor expressed his relief at their safe arrival and promised that his region would do its utmost to uncover the mastermind behind the incident, and also pledged full cooperation with the Listane family's investigation. Karen interrupted him, assuring the mayor that they knew the territory of Teba was not involved in the attack, which led to the mayor's visible relief. Hans commented that the mayor had changed a lot since he was the finance minister, to which the mayor replied, regretting having accepted the position of the damned mayor. He then apologized for his informal speech in front of the Duke's grandson. Karen asked him to speak comfortably, as formalities with his elders bothered him. The mayor hesitated at first, saying he couldn't speak informally with a member of a great ducal lineage, but he soon graciously accepted Karen's offer, then corrected himself after accidentally calling him by his first name. To change the atmosphere, the mayor suggested they move to another place to continue their talk. In a private room, Karen began to question the mayor, pointing out that the attackers had used explosives, not manna, to destroy the railway. He explained that explosives can only be obtained through the Military Supply Administration, which is strictly managed by the Empire, making it nearly impossible to smuggle them from within. Karen then proposed his theory, wondering if the explosives had been smuggled from outside the empire, specifically from the Sultanate of Bavar. He reminded the mayor that the empire and the Sultanate were the only two capable of manufacturing such high-quality explosives, and hinted that the situation would be embarrassing for the mayor if merchants from Teba were involved in such smuggling. The mayor was shocked by the accuracy of Karen's deduction. The mayor realized that if he didn't agree with Karen's theory, he could be seen as an accomplice, so he was forced to concede that the probability of smuggling was high. In his heart, the mayor cursed the stupid smugglers who had put him in this difficult position. At that point, Karen asked him to remember one thing, that the Seawolf Knights and members of Blue Sea Castle were harmed in this incident. The mayor realized he was being cornered, that the Listane family was known for repaying favors tenfold and debts 100-fold, and that he would be finished if he didn't cooperate. In an attempt to change the subject, the mayor asked Karen about his father's well-being, claiming to know him well and even to be on close terms with Karen's maternal grandfather, Sir Gale. Karen smiled sarcastically, noting that the mayor's sudden resort to name-dropping proved he was a true politician. At that moment, an aide burst into the room with an urgent message from the capital. The mayor thought he already knew its contents, that the Imperial Guard had departed, but the aide clarified that it wasn't just the Imperial Guard. The Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service himself had left at the head of the 1st Special Division, heading for Teba. The aide revealed that the Commissioner was Gale Barrington, the man known by the nickname the Demon King. When the mayor heard the name Gale, he was shocked and wondered if Sir Gale himself had come. He turned to Karen and asked if he had anticipated this. Karen answered in the affirmative, explaining that his maternal grandfather cared for him so much that he would drop everything to save his grandson if he were in danger. That night, the forces of the Internal Revenue Service's 1st Special Division arrived in the territory of Teba, spreading an atmosphere of tension in the city's crowded streets. Commissioner Gale Barrington led them, with a stern expression that did not bode well. Elsewhere, Grand Duke Hallo was observing the scene, having just arrived. His attendant commented that his arrival was swift, to which Hallo replied that it concerned his grandson. Meanwhile, the merchants of Teba were in a state of anger and confusion. They were surprised by the decision to conduct a sudden tax investigation that very night, without giving them any time to prepare, and they complained that the infamous 1st Special Division would be handling the investigation. In the meeting hall, the mayor was trying to calm them down when Karen and his group entered. One of the senior merchants supported the mayor's position, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Karen addressed the assembled merchants, explaining to them the magnitude of the disaster they were facing. He reminded them that not only was the Emperor's railway destroyed, but the Grand Duke's grandson and members of Blue Sea Castle were also attacked. He added that the attack was carried out using explosives presumably smuggled through the trade guilds in the territory of Teba, and then asked them if they now understood the seriousness of their position. The merchants were stunned and tried to back down, claiming they were only asking for more time to prepare. Karen asked the merchant who was speaking for his name, and he introduced himself as Viscount Homer of the Homer Trading Group. Karen calmly replied that he would personally make sure to deliver the Viscount's name to his grandfather at the National Tax Service. The Viscount was terrified and begged Karen to reconsider, admitting that he had spoken hastily. At that moment, the arrival of the 1st Special Division and the Commissioner was announced. Gale and his men entered, and he announced the immediate start of the tax investigation into all trade groups. He explained that the tax service had received reports of wealth accumulated through smuggling and tax evasion, and that the Emperor himself had ordered a thorough investigation, demanding everyone's full cooperation. Leo whispered to Hans, asking if the 1st Special Division was really that scary. Hans explained that this division deals with high-ranking merchants and nobles, and due to the power of their opponents, they can even mobilize the Imperial Guard, confirming that they were indeed frightening. After that, Gale approached Karen and greeted him warmly, commenting that 3 years had passed since they last met. Later, Gale and Karen were speaking in private. Gale asked his grandson if he was really okay, and Karen assured him he was. He then asked if he suspected anyone, which Karen denied. When Gale raised the possibility that it might be an internal family matter, Karen dismissed the idea, saying that if his uncles were the perpetrators, they would have left no trace at all. He explained that the culprits in this incident had deliberately left traces behind, as if they wanted it to look like it was the work of the Sultanate of Bavar. Gale asked his grandson if he intended to find and punish the culprits himself, then advised him not to, reminding him that the world is vast and full of powerful people, and that dangers still lurked in this place. He ordered him to stay quiet for now, and that they would leave for the capital the next morning on the Emperor's orders. He assured him that the adults would handle this matter. Karen agreed with a smile, promising he would remain calm. But as Gale walked away, he thought to himself that a power outage would occur, and realized that Karen never intended to keep his promise. That night, at the residence of someone named Owen, there was a flurry of activity as a carriage was hastily loaded. From the carriage, his wife asked him if he would come with them. He reassured her that he would follow them soon and ordered the carriage to depart. As the carriage drove away with his family calling out to him, Owen watched them leave, thinking that he had sent his family away first, and then cursed the situation he found himself in. Elsewhere in the city, Grand Duke Hello was watching from a rooftop. One of his men informed him that their targets had started to move, so Hello ordered the cleanup to proceed quickly and without any mistakes. Meanwhile, Karen was in his room, sharpening his sword in the middle of the night. Sir Zaris, who had just arrived, interrupted him, asking if he was planning to stir up trouble again. Karen mentioned he had heard that Commissioner Gale had forbidden him from going out, and asked Zaris if he also planned to stop him. Zaris explained that he had only come to deliver an order from the head of the family, Grand Duke Hello. Zaris officially recited the order to Karen Listine, youngest grandson of the Listine family. Upon receipt of this order, you are to find the culprits immediately and collect the blood price for the dead. He concluded the order by instructing Karen to show them clearly what the law of Blue Sea Castle means. Karen smiled wickedly upon hearing the order, and declared his obedience to the family head's command. Zaris commented that it would surely be a long night. Later, Karen and Leo were wandering through the eastern districts of Teba in disguise. Leo was grumbling, wondering why he had to play the role of a servant and go to a place where illegal deals were rampant. Karen explained that if two young nobles wandered in this place without escorts, it would raise unnecessary suspicion. Although Leo understood the logic, he continued to grumble about being the one playing the servant. Karen silenced Leo, telling him they were close to the place Zaris had mentioned. Leo was nervous, commenting that the place looked shady and not suitable for young masters. Karen mocked him and offered to let him go back if he was scared. Suddenly, a person appeared before them and asked why they were there. Karen stepped forward and greeted him, explaining he was sent by Sir Zaris. The man welcomed them, saying it was an honor to serve the young masters. The man revealed his face and introduced himself as Julio, then suggested they move to a safe house that had been prepared for them. Inside the safe house, Julio explained that the place was equipped with anti-eavesdropping devices, so they could speak freely. Karen, as a resident of Teba, asked him how he became an informant for the Listane family. Julio replied that he was repaying a kindness Sir Zaris had shown him when he was a child. Karen got straight to the point, saying they had intelligence that someone was planning to attack the Listane family by smuggling explosives and exploiting information about their trip to the capital. Karen asked Julio if he knew the identity of the culprit, and Julio answered yes. He explained that based on the information he had gathered, there were only two trading groups in the black market that dealt with explosives. They were the Kerr Group and the Caligo Group, but he added that the Kerr Group was in the process of withdrawing from the black market. Karen asked about the nature of the Caligo Group, and Julio told him it was a group composed of former slaves who would take any job as long as it was profitable. Julio then revealed a crucial piece of information. He had received news that members of the Caligo Group had left the city earlier that day, which shocked Karen. Julio acknowledged that the Caligo Group's departure at the same time as the attack made them highly suspicious. Karen began to analyze the available options: the Kerr Group, which was withdrawing from the black market, and the Caligo Group, composed of former slaves who would not refuse any profitable job. Leo pointed out that there wasn't enough time to investigate both groups and asked about their next destination. Karen smiled, saying the answer was obvious. People with nothing to lose are always the most reckless. Accordingly, they decided to head to Caligo, and Julio pledged to take them to their black market. Meanwhile, Mayor Glynn was talking with Commissioner Gale. Glynn asked Gale if he was really comfortable letting Karen act on his own. Gale replied that his son-in-law, Grand Duke Hello, had sent him a personal letter begging him, so he had no other choice, adding that wolves have their own way of dealing with wolves. Gale then revealed that Karen himself had asked him for a favor, to come up with any possible excuse to delay him and keep him out of his way. Despite being impressed by his grandson's audacity, Glynn expressed his concern, noting that Karen was only 13 years old. Gale dismissed these concerns, saying Karen had already proven his ability, and for geniuses, age is just a number. But Glynn insisted that Teba was a place where danger could strike at any time, and that some of the trade groups there were bribing politicians in the capital to expand their influence. He added that while Duke Hello chose to remain on the border, the powerful noble families in the capital were watching the Listane family closely, and Teba was full of people who would do anything to win their favor. Gale explained that this was the very reason the Emperor had intervened in Teba's affairs, to prevent the empire from being run by those who only act for their own gain. Gale then dropped a bombshell. Sir Mason was in Teba. Glynn was shocked, wondering if he meant the unbreakable shield, Mason the Eight-Starred. Back with Karen and his group, they finally arrived at the entrance to the Caligo Black Market. Julio confirmed that this was the only entrance, and explained that in emergencies, it could be sealed from the inside, a fact Karen commented was brutal. As they were preparing to descend, they found their way blocked by guards who had seized and bound Julio. One of the guards informed Julio that they were not receiving any customers that day on the boss's orders and told them to go back. When Julio asked why, the guard claimed he didn't know and asked them to leave politely. When they continued to ask questions, the guard drew his sword threateningly. Karen coolly challenged the guard, inviting him to try his luck and draw his sword to see what would happen. The guard hesitated while Julio pleaded with Karen to calm down. At that, Karen turned to Leo, who was disguised as Orha, and ordered him to start Plan B. Leo was confused and shocked, thinking to himself that they never had a Plan B in the first place.